Good evening in the United States. Good morning in the United States, and good evening in Georgia. Today we have this is episode number 6 or 7 right now we have
Yes.
of the English podcast, and I would like to greet all the audience and our viewers, and would like to thank Meurmishvili, who is co-hosting this with me, and I have an honor to introduce our distinguished guest, Mr. Kakha Gogolashvili, who used to work for the Foreign Service of Georgia for many, many years. He was representing Georgia in Brussels as a deputy head of mission to EU and NATO, as well as some European countries. And at the end of his career in Brussels, he was also chargé d'affaires or acting ambassador of Georgia to those organizations. And then he was heading multiple departments in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And now he is a distinguished scholar in probably the best think tank in Georgia, Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies, with which I am also affiliated for many, many years now. That's why we have, we have been knowing each other for more than 20 years now, as I understand. So, and yes, today we will be talking about Georgia, its positioning within vis-a-vis the European Union and its institution, and also global positioning of the country, as well as relationship with the United States in all these turbulent times that we are experiencing. So, I will give you a floor now, and sorry for this long
No, of
speech.
course. Batanakaha, very nice to see you and welcome to the show. Very much looking forward to your thoughts. Let's start from something that's very central to Georgia now, which is where is Georgia on its European path? I know it's a very sort of broad question, and so many things have happened, both from the EU side as well as from the Georgian authorities side, as well as from the demonstrators side. So, what's your sort of very general description of where Georgia stands right now?
Yes, hello. First of all, George, thank you so much for inviting me to this talk. So I also greet from here all those who are interested in our conversation and watching us. Of course, interesting question. And it's really not so easy to define and to say where we are now in regards to the path towards the European integration, or at which stage we arrived in this process. We started European integration 30 years ago, practically immediately after gaining independence. And since then, we never stopped. We never stopped our efforts to go ahead. We experienced, we had different type of governments. Not all of them were democratic or European by their nature, by their behavior, or other parameters, but at any stage of our development, we never abandoned, I mean, as a country, as a society, Georgians never abandoned the European path, the European aspirations, and hope that one day Georgia becomes a member of the European Union. And now, when we are so close to this goal, there's after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, as you know, with the change of geopolitical realities in Europe and in Eastern Europe, in our region, also attitudes from side of European Union and member states changed, and they decided to accept our, three countries, Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, to accept our applications. And finally, they agreed that enlargement is the best possible way to somehow to continue with European intervention, with European normative instruments to be deployed in the region, and with the hope that the region will become democratic. And there is time. It's a time to use this enlargement as an instrument for this. So they agreed. We became too close to the membership of European Union because in case if country really makes efforts, then it is possible that in 5 years we become members of the European Union. But this is now under very big question mark because suddenly and surprisingly for many of maybe not exactly for us sitting now in this studio, but for many people in Georgia and us outside of Georgia, surprisingly, this government started itself putting obstacles and inventing obstacles and promoting policy which is absolutely counterproductive in the European integration path. So we started distancing, in the same time being obtaining the status of the candidate country, being formally very close to the start of negotiations for membership, which we aspired so long and so.
But let me interrupt you for a second to sort of
please
get
go
to
ahead.
some details. So for those of our viewers who may not know what exactly you're talking about when you're saying that the current authorities in Georgia have stopped it, to most of the Georgian citizens' surprise. How do you explain that? What do you think is happening? Why did they do it?
Yes, also this is also a question to which we might not have exact answer, but we can guess and we can deduct from their previous steps and for all these actions that were undertaken by them during these 12 years when this government since this government is in power, that they never, I mean the government, and first of all, Bizina Ivanishvili, who is Georgian government with big, with minuscule saying that he is the main person who is actually who captures the government and the state as such. Bizina Ivanishvili never frankly wanted or believed in Georgia becoming a member of the European Union. This was a kind of trick, knowing that 90 or maybe a little bit less, 85% of population, according to yearly done exit polls and different type of studies, 85% of Georgians were in favor of Georgia becoming member of the EU. He was showing his false intentions to push the country in this direction, and practically he achieved that people get into the illusion that we are going to the European Union. Actually, this is the process which is difficult to describe to American viewers because probably you in America never experienced this kind of this type of manipulative behavior from side of the government. That finally it appeared that when we got too close to the integration, he got frightened. He got frightened of his positions. And why exactly? Because European integration is not a process just of integrating physically one country becomes a member of a community, and they continue as such as they've been. European integration is a type of normative transformation process that European Union is a community of countries, of states with very high demand as regards to democratic standard, as regards to human rights. First of all, it's a value-based community, and any country becoming a member is demanded to also to respect these values. And respecting these values, respecting not just formally, but in reality, means that any type of oligarch, any type of a dictator, or those who captured the state, they should abandon this. It's not possible to be a member of the European Union and at the same time exercise type of authoritarian ruling and having concentrated all the power in hands of one man or one small group. So this was the main reason why they started these deviations and started this confrontation with European institutions and with member states and with their governments.
Do you think, Georgi, I'm sorry if you have a question for...
No, please. Please.
Jump in at any moment, but I'm curious to know, is it possible to reverse the setback? Do you think, how do you see Georgia moving forward from this point on? So the current situation, to remind the viewers, is that in November, right, a month after the contested elections, Mr. Gobakhidze came out and said that Georgian authorities are stopping any active measures or are halting, basically, for 4 years Georgia's European integration. And that's what generated this protest that we're seeing in the streets now. But let's say nothing changes and we are in this situation until 2028. How do you see that? Is it reversible? Is it something, would the train pass the station or leave the station by the time Georgia is ready for the EU membership? What's your view on that?
No, first of all, this promise that that the government would return to the European, to the even not saying European integration, which means a little bit different than integration into the EU, which is directly indicating that becoming a member of the European Union, that it comes to this process and returns to this process, Georgia, in 2028. This is absolutely false, of course, promise. It's a type of, I don't know, misleading the perceptions and expectations of the population, and somehow creating the illusion that it is possible to stop everything before the 2028, and then in 2 years after, so open negotiations, and in 2 years become a member, because we would be ready by ourselves. We don't need European assistance in getting closer to all these criteria which are demanded for EU membership, etc. This is absolute illusion, because no country can advance on on EU integration path at this final stage of negotiations without active engagement with EU institutions, with European experts, with guiding from side of the EU. They're standing alone and trying to do something is practically impossible. First of all, even if there is a sincere will, if it exists from side of, but in reality, there is no will, and we should not forget that for European integration, when they start negotiations, they open so-called first cluster out of 6 clusters of chapters, which are chapters of legal chapters, so-called of European Union has so-called this EU law or the European common law, which consists of 35 chapters, and the first chapter, the opened are those chapters which talk about the human rights, rule of law, which demand from the country to adopt everything related to the democratic institutional building in the country. So it's about good governance. So it means the fight against corruption, and it is about transparency and the accountability of the country. Public procurement also is in this first cluster. Exactly, this is what they don't want to do. For example, EU demands first of all that your the judiciary is independent, it is impartial, and it is professional. And we see what happens now in Georgia, that our judiciary appeared a real catastrophe because it's not absolutely ready. It seems that the judiciary is fully dependent on the government's wish and will in their decisions. The same about any kind of democratic institutions or institutions safeguarding democracy, for example, like police, which should safeguard rule of law in the country, and many others. Of course, would it be elections, electoral law, and institutions regulating this sphere, and many others. So, summarizing, saying that they will never make any step forward in regards of in freeing, for example, from the influence the courts, Georgian judiciary system, because immediately when this system becomes independent, they will start losing their power. It appears that the power of Georgian Dream is established on their influence, which they exercise over Georgia's judiciary, and also the influence and full control that it exercises over the police forces, over the security forces. All this should be actually, according to European type reforms and European demands, all these institutions should should transfer under the democratic control, under control of society, and be free from the control and influence from side of any type of power in the country. So this should not belong nor to the presidential power, nor to the executive power as such, not belong. They should be controlled by the society, and they should act on interests of the society. This is important, and they will never do this. So that's why this promise was absolutely false, and people understood this. And there was no only question of falsifying the elections. The elections were falsified. I'm absolutely sure about this, and not only me, but there are so many proofs, and so many proofs were shown directly on TV and discussed it, debate in the country. And there is no doubt, whoever is not under the hypnosis of the Georgian Dream, everybody know that the elections were falsified in a very intensive way. But there was another shock, saying that they practically went against the constitution of Georgia, not having even this illegitimate parliament, not having constitutional rights to change something that was established by previous legislature and inserted into the constitution. More specifically, this is Article 78 of the constitution, saying that Georgia's institutions, they obligatory should do everything to bring Georgia into the European Union and the NATO.
European and Euro-Atlantic integration. They have to work on European and Euro-Atlantic integration. That's how it is.
Yeah, exactly. Not just work on this integration process, but to bring the country into the Union and into the NATO. And this declaration that they did, it was absolutely unconstitutional. So they they became illegitimate in any sense. First, the falsified elections, and second, the breaking the constitutional provisions, and this gives people absolutely right for demanding the new elections. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, please go ahead, Georgi.
As a follow-up question on this, I have. I just thought, you very much in detail spoke about the setbacks and different dimensions, how that that happened actually. But what is interesting, I think, for us and for our viewers, I think it would be interesting to hear from you an opinion, an expert opinion about where all these lead. So we know what happened, we know what is happening now, but where we can end up as a consequence of all this, especially I'm talking about the very turbulent environment, as I already mentioned in the beginning of our program, where we are, what we can see in the future, and what kind of threats you see and feel because of this process that you just mentioned to us.
Yes, this is quite serious question. It embraces different aspects and directions that could be analyzed in this regards. First of all, why Georgia was so keen to become member of the EU and further to become also member of the NATO, because security for Georgians was always very problematic issue. And during centuries, Georgia was looking and seeking for security guarantees. The small country surrounded by historical enemies and very different region with very different, I would say, ideologies and different type of institutional setups in different countries, and many of them aggressively looking towards to exercising influence over Georgia. So for our luck, finally it appeared that we are quite close from the best democratic society in the world, which is European Union and the community of European states, and that it is a real possibility for the country for once to become a member of the club which can provide security for the country. Everybody knows that EU is not a security club per se. It's not a military alliance, but having such a strong economic power and being already a strong political player in the world, being member of European Union, it means practically very strong guarantees of being defended from or being secured from any kind of aggression, a new aggression from the neighboring states. So this was one very important issue, which is under the risk now. And second is, of course, the country's development. The democracy is important, I think, for Georgians, for majority of Georgians, to have a kind of anchor, which is European Union, in order to stabilize the democratic development of the country. It's very important. If Georgia stays alone, then of course any type of governments which tend to establish authoritarian regimes, even mafias to come to the power, and different type of actors which are thinking only about their own interests, into different interest groups. Of course, they would be able always to come to the power and to catch and capture the country. So, but being the member of the European Union means democracy, stable democracy for a long time. Even inside of European Union, we have the countries who shown some democratic setback. You can say that Hungary and Slovakia, for example, they are becoming more authoritarian countries, but still European Union makes them criticizing and always monitoring and using the sanctions, which is, for example, not disbursing the structural funds, assistance from structural funds and agricultural funds and different other things. So they have instruments inside of European Union to make the countries' governments accountable to the wider union and society. This is very important for the country. And third, of course, this is economic and social development, accumulation of human capital, everything, innovation, technological development for the country. So if we look to the future of Georgia, Georgia alone would be much more vulnerable to any kind of external shocks, any kind of risks. Then Georgia inside of the European Union, yes.
I keep interrupting you every time, but we did have a question that came in that's very relevant to the point that you were making. The question is, what about Georgia's neutrality? Is it possible, and what it would mean? And maybe before you move to answering this question, it's worth reminding the viewers that we don't have too many neutral countries anymore in Europe, especially. We, of course, had Sweden and Finland. Sweden, a country that was traditionally politically neutral. Finland, that became neutral during
100 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Basically, in some cases, neutrality was also kind of forced onto Finland by the Russian Empire first and the Soviet Union. So both of those countries joined NATO after Putin invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. So some experts are saying that, well, maybe neutrality is not really that great of an idea, because we're talking about very powerful militaries for both Finland and Sweden. They are not the countries that would be very easy for any invader or any enemy to hurt or swallow easily. They have very formidable military forces, intelligence services, technology. Sweden is one of the best countries, or one of the countries that makes the best submarines, for example, right, for the Baltic Sea. Finland has an incredibly good air force, as well as the ground forces. So the point is that we're talking about two countries that are both economically and militarily and politically pretty impactful on the European continent. And they chose not to be neutral anymore. So to me, every time we talk about neutrality, those are the two examples that I always keep in mind. If neutrality was that great, then why would somebody who's neutral want to change their status and become a member of alliance if neutrality was that great? So that's that's a little intro, I guess, to your response. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think the history of Georgia already responded on this question, because Georgia, 100 years ago, it was in 1920, when Georgia, then independent Georgia, between two empires, so Russian Empire and Soviet Empire, between these two big empires' existence, there was a room of 3-4 years when Georgia became independent, and very quickly we actually established a democratic state. It was really being built up on the European model. And then there was a momentum in 2020 when Russia demanded from Georgia to show its neutrality by withdrawing the German and the British forces, expeditionary forces, small contingents, but still were staying in Georgia by that moment, and to sign an agreement promising to be neutral and not allied to anybody against Russia, etc. So Georgia formally confirmed its neutrality, and the result was very quickly. In few months, Russia started invasion. Then Soviet Russia started invasion of Georgia. Nobody came to its defense because the Georgia itself requested the German and British forces to abandon the country, and actually they were not ready to engage in big war because of Georgia at this moment against Russia still, but still it was a type of somehow deterrence. A type of deterrence was there when they were stationed in Georgia. So I think that historical experience we already have. And second is just we can make analysis that you said that the neutral countries, usually like Sweden, Finland, or Switzerland, which is very good example, they have powerful armies. They have powerful, very strong armies, able to at least to cause quite a strong pain to any aggressor, would it be a big or small aggressor, to them. And second is the economic power and their political, I think, the weight in international relations, many other things. There is also compromise between different international actors, which makes them somehow untouchable. Country cannot just declare neutrality without having such a position. So without having all these kind of parameters at place. And in Georgia's case, it's absolutely impossible that Georgia remains independent, if not formally independent. In reality, somebody, it would be Russia, first of all, who will try immediately to start influencing Georgia and exercising the strong intentions to make the country practically to enslave the country in political terms, and it's absolutely unrealistic. I think that for Georgia, many generations of Georgians were thinking what kind of country we need. And finally, majority in Georgia, this is 76%. Just a few days ago, there was a study, quite extensive study in the country, shown 76% of Georgians are convinced that we need to become members of the NATO. And neutrality is a type of invention in order to keep country vulnerable against Russia's aggression and their aggressive plans. I think,
Mr. Gogolashvili, we know that today. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. I can hear you. I can hear you very well.
Thank you. Today we have an information that President Trump had a phone call with Mr. Putin, and then he had also a phone call with President Zelensky. And my question is basically, the CNN has actually spread an information that, according to Mr. Trump, he said that they were discussing, of course, Ukraine, Middle East. They discussed the strength of dollar, also discussed some other issues, and at the end, he also mentioned that they agreed to visit each other in each other's countries. So exchange visits, right? So what is your take on this in general? And in this context, because we are mainly talking about, peace process related to the war in Ukraine. Somehow I call it like this, but we don't know how much peaceful it will be at the end. What is the influence of all these global processes and relationship between the United States, Russia, and the war in Ukraine? Also the situation in the wider Middle East, because we are not very far away from that region. how that will affect the situation within Georgia and exactly Georgia's standing within the region and in international arena, and what kind of influences you see in this for us?
Yes, of course, we always were counting on the positive developments in the Russia-Ukraine war. I mean positive from the position of the strong supporter of Ukraine, that many people in Georgia, and this is very general view, believe that outcome of the war in Ukraine would influence or will influence the fate, Georgia's fate and future. So, first of all, it is about the future position of Russia. Will Russia continue positioning as a hegemon in the region and will try to dictate its will and try again to turn its aggressive side towards other countries like Georgia, or it may be Kazakhstan, or Armenia again, anybody else. But as regards especially Georgia is a key country in this regards. If Russia really wants to expand itself as an empire and to reach its very well defined, very clearly, I would say, define the goals of having its own sphere of influence, then Georgia is a key country in this regards, because if Russia owns Georgia's orientation is changed and it's submitted to Russia, then Russia owns practically the South Caucasus, and it has different in the south of Russia. Then Russia secures its very strong strategic positions. So we are very, very vulnerable and risky. For us, its situation is very risky. Everything depends what will be the outcome of the Ukrainian war. And would Russia promise to the West, for example, not to continue threatening its neighboring countries? And would Russia be obliged and put in a position to develop itself as I don't believe in transformation of Russia, of course, but Russia could be limited in its aggressive plans. This is most important thing, I think. Even less important is to secede some territories, Ukrainian territories, because I never believed, saying frankly, that Ukraine would be able to return all territories which Russia occupied, especially those territories where they have a majority of Russian-speaking population and who demonstrate themselves. It would be very, very difficult to do this. But it's very important that Russia's aggressive intentions are limited and put once into the certain frames. And then Georgia is saved if this happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Today was really big news in the U.S., and it's only 4 p.m., so the day is still very young. We don't know what else is going to happen. But one of the announcements today was that, as Georgi said, President Trump spoke with President Putin and President Zelensky for about an hour with Zelensky and for about an hour and a half with Putin. We don't know what maybe it will come out throughout the day today, but at this point, we don't know exactly what the conversation was about Ukraine. All we know is that both leaders supposedly had a conciliatory tone towards each other, which is an interesting word to hear in this context. And also that President Putin invited President Trump to visit Moscow. Now, I believe Obama was the last president who ever visited, American president that visited Moscow, and it was in 2013. There has not been a U.S. president in that country since then. So it would be interesting to see if President Trump actually accepts the invitation. And if he does, under what conditions? Would it be after the agreement is reached? Would it be after Putin demonstrates that he's implementing the agreement? And a couple points to come back to what you were saying earlier. It would be wonderful if we can have some sort of agreement or understanding with Russia that just like any normal country, you have to live within your borders. You cannot just keep taking away other countries' territories. And Russia has refused to do that. 2008, Georgia, 2014, Crimea, 2022. And we don't know what's going to happen next. So any sort of agreement between Trump and Putin should, or at least should be taken with a grain of salt, because Russia has multiple of ceasefire agreements, multiple of conventions that it's signatory to, but Russia is not implementing, for example, 2008 ceasefire agreement with Georgia. Why would it implement something that he signs with President Trump, who's going to be in office for next 4 years, and that's it? So very interesting. It's today has been a roller coaster of news cycle. One thing, it started with Secretary Hegseth saying that Ukraine's never going to get his borders back. As you were, that's what reminded me about this comment. That's what you were saying. But in 1945, nobody thought that Germany was going to be one country once again. But it happened. So, and international relations, never say never is a good thing. So maybe at this point, it's not an attainable goal, which was not the case for Germany after World War II. But in 1989, Germany became the united country again. So you never know. Things always change. So I just wanted to add a bit of optimism. If I managed to do that, I don't know, but at least I tried to. So it's not over. Nothing's ever over in international relations, I believe.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, but I would add that sometimes to keep the status quo is better than to change it. So it depends which direction the change occurs. We all expect, of course, that finally the change will bring something positive to Georgia, because we lost a lot of things, and we suffered a lot as a country, as a nation. And Georgia is actually a peaceful country, and people in majority of its population, it's tending towards democracy, towards justice, and especially the young generation of Georgians, they aspire to live in a country with justice and with democracy, and less. The discrimination also is not acceptable in the majority of this country. So this country deserves to be in good, to have a good fate, good future. But for this, we need to work a lot, and we need to be always on alert, because nobody knew that our government will turn in such enemies towards their own nation, toward their own people. So now Georgian people struggle strongly, and you see that more than 70 days, already 75 days, I think they are protesting in streets every day without any rest. They come and close streets and they protest. This is important that our Western partners, who we consider our natural partners, because for Georgia, it's a natural civilizational connection exists for us. In our consciousness exists this connection between the Western civilizations. When I say Western, I mean democratic world. Today, democratic world, but centuries ago, it was just Western civilization, European civilization. And we consider part of this civilization. So we think that only being a real member of this community of states, would it be Euro-Atlantic or European community, only this can bring to Georgia real peace from inside of the country and peace on its external borders. Also integration. We expect very much that the democratic development and membership of the democratic union like European Union or the NATO would increase the motivation in our breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia for reintegration. Any other attempts? Some people say that all the keys are in hands of Moscow. We need to have good relations with Moscow in order to bring these regions back to Georgia. This is absolute illusion. I think that the key is in our hearts and in the hearts of Abkhazians and Ossetians. They should see that Georgia is a good country, is a democratic country. It's a country where people can live happy. And only this can motivate them for reopening real negotiations and establishing some kind of peace and common future inside of Georgia. So I think that this everything is very interlinked, strongly interlinked. I think this is Ukrainian war, Russia's positions in this world, and Western support also, and dedication to integrate Georgia into its realm.
Thank you very much for this extended interview, or the joint program. I think we excelled in our thematic areas that we were actually preparing for today. I don't know, Iya, do we have anything else to add to this?
We always have more topics to talk about, but maybe next time, because we've been talking.
Yes, and I would like to hear live. Would like to ask Mr. Gogolashvili. Time to time we might, bother you once again, and invite for comments on the given issues that will be important for that particular period of time. So,
but thank you very much, Patrono Kakha, for your thoughts, and
thank you so much.
For your vision and everything that you've done for Georgia's EU path and integration.
Thank you very much. And I want to wish to you and to your this emission or this talks success. I'm sure, because so professional people are you both, Iya and Georgi, that you will make many very interesting and informative emissions for the audience, which will increase and which will be interested in your the conversations. Yes, thank you very much. And it was pleasure to me to participate.
And thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.